My name is Alex Townsend, and I'm really happy to have you all here today to learn more about the important topic of women in philanthropy. I myself am a philanthropy manager at the University of Manchester, and I'm also the founder of the Women Who Give podcast and network, which hopefully you all will become a part of after this conversation. Um, a few housekeeping things before we get started. We are recording, as Cannie said, and we'll be sharing the recording afterwards. We'll also have about half the time will be Q&A, so you can just put your questions in the chat if you prefer to have them there, or we'll open it up for conversation at the end, and we'll really love to hear from all of you. So we'll be looking forward to that section. And really, this conversation has come from a passion of Cannie and I to really engage women philanthropists and believing in the power of women philanthropists globally, really. So Cannie and I connected a couple years back now and have been talking about what women in philanthropy looks like. I myself am based in the UK. I'm originally from the States. And Cannie's been working on this fantastic work in the US. And I saw that there was really an opportunity for us to be doing more in the UK to learn from what is happening in the US so we could apply some of these principles here. So I hope that you come away from this session feeling like you have a better understanding of what the women in philanthropy landscape looks like, what the opportunity is from a women's wealth perspective. I hope that you feel inspired and have some tools to actually implement your own Women in Giving initiative at your organization. And I hope that this kickstarts a conversation of like-minded peers where we can lean on each other as we're trialing different techniques to unlock the giving potential of more diverse donors at our organization. So I thought I would help set the stage with a few stats to really help us understand what the opportunity is. So it's projected that 60% of the wealth in the UK is going to be owned by women by the end of this year. That's a huge change that's happening with women's wealth, and it's due to a number of demographic factors regarding women inheriting wealth, not once but twice, from parents and then from spouses. And there's a number of other things that is leading to this as well. It's also, there's also a new stat that just came out from McKinsey in the last month that stated that wealth from, or assets owned by women went from 4.6 trillion in Europe to 6.6 trillion in the last 5 years. And it's a similar trend in the US as well. So it went from 10 trillion to 18 trillion in the last 5 years. So we're seeing huge amounts of resource come under the ownership of women. We also know that women have huge decision-making power within the household. So 78% of purchases are decided by women within the household. That's both in the US and the UK, which speaks to the kind of need for us to be thinking about our individual giving programs and our annual giving programs, because clearly women are making decisions around where their wealth goes. And then another kind of interesting stat is that we do know that women actually give more per dollar than men when they are giving philanthropically. They tend to spread it out across organizations, but they do generally give more. Once they're giving, they like to be more involved in their organizations as well. So they tend to volunteer and give more of their time. And we know as well that 50% of high net worth couples are actually making joint decisions around where their philanthropic their donations go, especially at that higher level. So this should all be a pretty compelling case for why we need to be thinking about women within our organizations. But surprisingly, our models of fundraising have very much been built off of raising funds from a very, very limited donor pool. And I'm assuming you can all guess what that donor pool looks like. So what we have to do, there's a lot of change that has to happen in order for us to actually untangle the systems that have been built to solicit funds from one group and to really change mindsets around how we do things, because there's different practices that are going to resonate with men versus women. And we'll get to hear from Cannie soon about what that looks like. So I would like to lead us into our conversation with Cannie, who is joining us today from the US. She is now Dr. Cannie Graham, actually, so I need to say that she just got her PhD last week. So huge congratulations to Cannie for that amazing accomplishment. And Dr. Cannie is the Associate Vice President of Collaborative Philanthropy and Volunteer Leadership at James Madison University. So that's a new title as well. And we'll speak to her experience, which you'll hear about shortly, about her ability to really engage diverse audiences in a collaborative way. She has over 20 years of experience in higher education and public health, and she has been key driver in engaging diverse donors and community partners. Her work highlights the importance of collaboration and inclusion in advancing philanthropic goals. She's personally passionate about fostering relationships that create meaningful, sustainable impact, and she brings valuable insight to the table on how we can better understand and engage women in philanthropy, particularly as their financial influence continues to grow. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Cannie to share more about her experience, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So Dr. Cannie, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. I'm going to pop up our PowerPoint so we can ask our questions if that works for you.
Absolutely.
All right. Give me 1 second to get the tech going. Always a challenge. Of course, I have to put the glasses on. You know, it's that stage of life. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Looks great.
Perfect. Okay. So, oops, we're a little behind here. We're at the end. Let me stop that real quick. Somehow I got moved forward. Excuse me. All right, let's try this again. Never ceases to amaze me as long as we've been on Zoom and PowerPoint that something always inevitably goes wrong.
They presently aren't as intuitive as you think they would be, given how long we've been.
There we go. Can you see the overview?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Perfect. So we've kind of gone over an overview of what we expect today. So I'll zip past this one, but we do have some interactive bits to this presentation. So we wanted to get your thought on this Slido here. So have you ever worked on a women's giving program at your organization? If you haven't used Slido, Alex, I don't know if I know you use it more in the UK than we do in the US. So if you want to explain it.
Yeah, so you just go on to slido.com, and then when it comes up, you should be able to just put in the number next to that hashtag there, and then it'll pull up this poll, and you just simply answer it. And you don't need to have an account or anything like that. You can also scan the QR code as well.
Cool. So we've got some folks who
We
have.
got 2 votes.
Yeah. As expected, we're getting more no's. That's how it's,
Oh yeah, it was changing. I was like, oh wow, we have a lot of
I
people
know.
actually who have done it, but it switches it around. Okay, or maybe I read it wrong. Okay.
No, you were right. It was like, yes, we have one. And
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
So we'll give you another few seconds to answer. We'll have another one. We have another slide next. That's a Slido just to get your opinion as well. So, and then this data will be available, I think, later.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Cannie and I are really looking to use a lot or start to kind of get insight around what the landscape's looking like, especially in the UK where there's just less information. So as much as you can interact is really helpful.
Yes. So I'm going to move to the next one, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. The next Slido is, what is your biggest barrier to engaging more women donors? Lack of buy-in or leadership, unclear strategy or where to start, competing priorities, yep, and limited data or insight. This is interesting.
Mm.
All right. Well, for the sake of time, I'm going to move along if that's okay. Um, I'm just going to screenshot this real quick because I want to make sure that I comment on it later. Um, keep, logging in and answering if you're there. But so we set the stage as to why. So I'm going to zip through these. Um, Alex shared some stats and trends. I want to talk to you about a successful model that's been happening in the US at my university, James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Um, we are a, we are a, our school is about 22,000 undergraduate students. We have about 160,000 living alumni currently. We have tripled in size over the last 20 years as a university, which is crazy. We've just grown and grown and grown. But one of the things that I have been really lucky to get involved with in the last, so I've been doing this now for 11 years, is work with our Women for Madison program and women's giving. And this has become a huge passion for me in my work, not only just women's philanthropy, but inclusive philanthropy as well. I started focusing on women. I'm going to talk to you later about some of the principles that work with women's philanthropy. But what I have found in my work and in my research, and this is one of the things that I studied throughout my doctorate, was that the principles for women's philanthropy work with lots of minoritized communities and affinity groups, particularly at universities. But I'm also finding the same in healthcare and nonprofits. So the work that I do is not only at James Madison University, I also have a small consulting company called Spark Women's Philanthropy that will be changing into Spark Inclusive Philanthropy in the near future, because I've seen it work not only at my university, but at other universities and nonprofits across the states. Another thing that, Alex and I are working on the Women Who Give network here in the UK, but I also help run something called the Association for the Advancement of Women's Philanthropy in the US, and it's a very successful group. We have an annual conference that anyone is welcome to attend from anywhere. That's how I met Teresa, my Canadian, on here. Um, and we we just want to uplift these principles, keep this conversation going, and let people know that it is worth the time, it is worth the resources, and it is worth bringing to the table. Like you mentioned, it's competing with other resources. Well, as Alex mentioned, our models are based on wealthy white men, to be perfectly blunt. Um, what we have found is we are leaving money on the table and we are not including women in the conversations. And so at JMU, about 13 years ago, a group of women advancement professionals brought this idea forward to our vice president and said, we really need to start something with women. And so Women for Madison was born. I took it over about 3 years in, so about 10 years ago, and we've just celebrated, some milestones. But basically, Women for Madison is an annual giving model for us at JMU, um, and it's a diverse group of alumni, parents, faculty. We even have friends who are involved. We've now added a student component to it, trying to get some of these rising seniors and juniors and seniors networking with our women, mentoring one another, but also thinking about philanthropy as a lifelong value. And so we work with these women to engage and inform them about opportunities and needs of the university. And our goal is ultimately to increase their financial impact. At JMU, not only their financial impact, but also their engagement and their interaction at JMU as well. So it was grassroots really from the beginning. We had a group of people that like I mentioned, got together, and the VP was like, sure, go for it. But it took a while to build the momentum. So one of the things that we've really tried to focus on with Women for Madison is our growing with engagement. It's an engagement to investment model. And so we found that in the beginning, we did some focus groups and we asked women what they wanted, what they were seeing. And they just said, I just don't feel connected to the university after I graduated. I've lost touch. Or you only call my partner or my spouse or my husband. When, to get him involved in like leadership boards or councils, or you're only asking the male counterpart in this relationship to speak to classes or to mentor students. Well, I have something to offer as well. And that's what we kept hearing over and over and over again, is that women just weren't being asked. And so in the very beginning, when we met, it became a model of engagement. And later I'll talk about the what worked, what didn't. But we started having some small events. We call them circles here at JMU, because that models it's James Madison. Dolly Madison is who we have branded these circles around, because of her work in the White House as the first lady of the United States. Dare I mention the White House right now? But so, but we definitely had small circles where we got women together and had events, started talking about the university, started talking about our priorities, what was happening, and how to get them involved. And women just started raising their hands. It was unbelievable. And my mentor, Kathleen Lair, who literally wrote the book on gender giving, she said women will come out of the woodwork. And they did. They started to come out. So at that time, the group that started Women for Madison basically said, any gift to Women for Madison makes you an official member of Women for Madison. So whether it was a $5 gift or a $5 million gift, you were in. And so that's how we started. But really, our focus was encouraging a sense of belonging, of ownership, and leadership among women, giving in community, which is what women really want to do. They don't want this transactional feeling, this one-off gift. They want to give in community. They want to see success, and they want to talk about it. They want to celebrate it. So those were some of the things that we saw early on. So as I took it over. We went for a couple of years, and then right before COVID, of course, we had decided we were going to start a specific women's giving circle. One of my challenges at first is we were trying to be all things to all women at JMU. And I didn't have the resources, the time, the money, to be all things to all women. And so we decided as a group with my leader, I have an executive advisory council of volunteer women. There's about 30 women on that are chosen through a process. We decided to start a women's giving circle that was very specific and that had a very specific return on investment. So we put together what we now call the Amethyst Circle. So we launched that literally in 2021. So we were planning all this. We were excited about it. We had this huge retreat. We brought in a consultant. My mentor, Kathleen Lair, we brought in this consultant, met with all the leadership at the university, deans, my volunteers were there. It was huge. We had, I don't know, about 150 people in the room. This was 3 days before the world shut down for COVID. And we were training everybody on the importance of women's and inclusive philanthropy, trying to change the culture at our university, which needed to change, just in this direction. And we talked about this, we shut down. And honestly, COVID was probably the best thing that happened because it gave me cover to really focus on this initiative with my board. And so for a year, we created the Amethyst Circle. So in February of 2021, we launched this idea. Previously to getting started and launching it, we focus grouped women. We asked what they wanted. We looked at data, levels of giving, where we thought women would be most comfortable and give. So again, this is an annual giving program. So that's women who give every year to something in the US. But we set up what we called a founders group because in the United States, we needed $50,000 to start an endowment. But these were going to be expendable scholarships to underrepresented students who needed the money to come to James Madison. So I really needed 5 founders at $15,000. But we said, let's set a goal for 10, right? Let's see if we can get 10 women and get $100,000 to start our endowment, 10,000 going to the endowment, 5,000 going to expendable scholarship dollars that would go right out the door to these incoming students that were applying to James Madison. We announced it at our first council meeting on Zoom that Friday, I think it was February 10th, I think is the date, 2021. And I said, okay, this is what we're doing. Is anybody interested in being a founder? 15 hands went up. I almost fell over. I had no idea, we undershot, right? Like we didn't expect a good response. So 15 women. And so I can remember going back to my group and thinking, oh my God, we've got to do this. We've got to set a different goal. So we hadn't even announced it publicly yet. So got 15. The next week, we're like, let's see if we can get 25. We announced it publicly, and we were only giving 3 months to become a founder. And then it was $5,000 every 2 years after that to raise $1 million in scholarships every 2 years for these students. Um, within, I'm not even kidding you, within a month and a half, we had over 50 Amethyst Circle founders. So we were working on this huge endowment of $500,000, which we never expected to have, and then all this expendable money to give to scholarships. And by the time that we officially launched it at our big event, which was also online that year, a big summit that we have every other year, we had over 79 founders. So sitting almost $1 million in our endowment, and a little over 500,000 in our expendable, we were just blown away. And then we're like, man, we should have asked for more. Like, we should have asked for more. So we launched it in 2021. The first 2 year cycle was 21 to 23. We raised over $1.5 million in scholarships. We've repeated that now. We're in our second year. We've raised another $1.5 million. We don't do the founders anymore. We honor those women specifically in different ways every year. They've got pins and things, and there's an honor roll on our website. But now we're more into an annual giving where women give $2,500 per year to the Amethyst Circle. And so our goal is about 500,000 plus a year to raise to get to this $1 million every 2 years. And so far we've given out over 30 scholarships to students, which is $5,000 per year. So it's about $20,000 at the end of there. And it's that gap in the US for students that are Pell eligible, that are getting financial aid, but they can't make the gap. And we lose these kids to other schools because they're getting scholarships. So the Amethyst Circle for us, the Giving Circle, was the thing that really changed our, not only our mission and but the women got so excited about it. This is their mission. They found purpose behind this, and they get to meet the students, and we have events around it. And it just became the thing that really changed the face of Women for Madison, but also change the face of philanthropy at JMU. And that's actually our mantra. We're changing the face of philanthropy, and yours is the face we most want to see. And so we say that a lot, and we get women excited about it, and they love the why behind what we're doing. So there's a few things real quickly with what worked and what didn't work. Oops, sorry, that slide's overlapping. Things that really worked for us and that we have worked really hard on and continue to work hard on is that it's relational, not transactional. We tell stories. Our events are incredibly inclusive. Men can come to anything they want. We do not. We have some male members actually who've given in honor of, or just they love our events. We have a very diverse population of women, and we also try to share opportunities about the why and how their gift is transforming the students and the donors' experience. Shared leadership. Our women, they want to be at the table. They want their voices heard. So again, we have a executive advisory council of women who represent the greater, our greater alumni group and parents. We also do a lot of surveys and ask them what they want. We have huge events. We just had our fourth summit, which again is every other year. This is since I have started. Every year that has grown exponentially in numbers who attend, and that is the ultimate girls' weekend in the Berg. People come back, have a really great time. But we ask them what they want. But we also don't shy away from asking for money. We have this wonderful conference, this big celebration. We give out some awards of philanthropy, but we don't shy away from the asks and the gifts. And they hear from our students, and they hear from faculty. They hear from lots of people about why it's important. Another thing that's been really important in our lessons of what worked is intersectionality absolutely matters. Women are not a monolith. We need, when we saw exponential growth in our events and in our dollars was when we started to ask all women to come to the table. So I can remember I have a very active group of Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated, which is one of the historically Black sororities here in the US. I asked a woman to be on the board who was involved in that group. Within months, we had so many AKAs so it just grew our Black population and our Black affinity group. I'm not kidding you. When I say exponentially, I'm not kidding you. And then that brought in, and then they started to see themselves in our group. And so then they brought other folks in. And so we have diverse voices, we have diverse ages, backgrounds, identities. Everyone is welcome. And so that has been really important. The biggest mistake I made, and I just said it earlier, is we didn't ask big enough. That every gift matters. And I wasn't there when it started, and I probably would have just gone along too with that. Any gift makes you a woman from Madison mantra. But I think that really limited impact. And if I were to do this over again, and now as I work with other schools in my consulting, um, I say go for the bigger asks first. Look for your major or your transformational gifts with a giving society and let the annual gifts come later. I'm actually working with our Black alumni group now at JMU. And because they came to me and said, we want a Women for Madison for us. That's what we want. We want to be recognized. We want to do this. We want the events. And I said, well, we can't be the same, but let's do something different. And we're starting at the major gift, which is $25,000 to $50,000 and up for us, and the transformational gift, which is $1 million and above. And we're working on over $1 million already in the first year of just those gifts. So that was one thing I would recommend is we understrolled. I didn't know we'd get that many founders. We should have asked for bigger gifts. But I will say I'm proud of the diversity and that we do have young women that are joining at the lower levels too, because that's what they can afford right now in their careers. But we also have some of our more seasoned ladies who are giving at the major and transformational level too. So it's a really nice mix of what we're doing and the group that we get to that come in. All right, let's see. So just a few things I will just say about shifting the model. I'll start with the broader institutional change. This is, again, another thing that I've heard and I have seen, but seeing the unseen in inclusive philanthropy is the magic. That's the secret sauce, right? So if you just start acknowledging women, people of color, different identities, they feel it, they know it, they have a voice, they have a seat at the table, and then their engagement then leads to their investment, sometimes small, and it's a trust thing. And I'll talk about the 70s in a moment, but all of these things build trust over time. And we have seen all of these groups start to give more and more and more as they have been more involved. Our engagement over the years has grown, again, exponentially. I think the last, literally since it started, it's been over 350%. Our engagement has grown with our events. We would go from 2 events a year. We now do 16 to 20 events a year. And these are often hosted by our volunteers, not by the staff. So we've engaged our volunteers to be change makers, to be active. We try to go to things when we can, but we can't get to everything. And so these women are fundraising and they're doing peer-to-peer fundraising for the university because they believe in it so much. So again, engaging women, you're not just getting their wallet, you're getting all of them. And that's exactly what you need as a university to really make this work. Our funds raise, again, we went from a couple, maybe $10,000 to $15,000 a year for Women for Madison in the first couple of years to now we're in the millions in a cycle of every 2 years. And so we have seen our metrics, engagement metrics grow, our funds raised to date grow. And then this change now where people are seeing the value of women at the table. So I'm getting calls like, hey, can you recommend a woman for my College of Education board? Can you recommend somebody for this board? Can you have somebody come into my classroom and speak? The other thing we're getting now is, hey, would Women from Madison co-host an event with us? Because you can get people in the door. So our reputation has also grown, which is phenomenal because we're branded. They know who we are, and it's exciting. I could talk for hours on this, so I'm going to keep moving so we can get to the rest of it. You can tell I'm really pumped about it. So let me share with you the 6 principles of women's philanthropy, because this is really this is where the rubber meets the road and what we have found to be really important. Sorry, I'm going to get to my notes because I just got so carried away there. The 6 principles, and these can happen at any time. They are not necessarily linear. I find that they happen cyclically throughout the course of your women's philanthropy endeavors and initiatives. But the first one is that strategy begins with insight. You have to start with understanding. Organizations who want to create a women's philanthropy or any inclusive philanthropy, because I've seen this work again with Black alumni, with LGBTQ plus, populations here in the States, parents, we have active parents giving. It also works with parents. I've worked with Hispanic groups, so it can work with any of these groups. But you have to pause just to review industry research. So some of the articles that Alex referenced, the Women's Philanthropy Institute at the University of Indiana is a wonderful resource. They've done lots of research. Analyze your own donor data. There's just a few key points that you need. You don't have to get analysis paralysis over the data, but you need a few key points about women versus male giving. Um, and then, look at current practices that you're doing that would better resonate with female or women donors. Because there are some. I mean, there definitely are some out there. The second principle is women's input is key. I'm going to say this 1,000 times in this presentation. You just have to ask. And you need to get women engaged in conversations about their motivations, about their behaviors, and about their goals. And they will talk. As we all know, they will provide valuable insights to you about what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, and probably volunteer to help. It can lead to really innovative ideas and strategies that you may have never thought of. The third principle is women give more than money. And I've said this again and again. We're going to talk about the 60s, 70s, excuse me, in the next slide. But women come in and they bring not only their dollars, they bring their engagement, their volunteerism, their friends, their family, everybody they know. I mean, think of the work that you might do in the community, in your own communities, if you're on a board, think about who really gives and works, and then they bring in all their people. It's most likely women. That's just the trend. That's the behavior. And so definitely recognizing and engaging these multifaceted contributions are really important and can strengthen your organizational support over time. The next one, leadership involvement, is pivotal. I've seen a lot of groups that try to start grassroots and don't get buy-in from their vice presidents or their advancement folks and other folks across the university. That's key. You're going to need it eventually, and to have it is important. And so setting yourself up for success from the get-go by getting those allies on board is really important. And so having a conversation, whether it's through you or bringing in a consultant, whatever that is or whatever that looks like for you is pivotal. They're going to make it happen. And they will also start to align this with vision, strategic priorities, and resource allocation if needed. Starting reveals the path forward is the fifth principle. That just means, just start, just something small, just try it, just take a small gamble, take a small risk, and do something that even on a small scale might uncover a new opportunity and an area where women can support you and see the significant impact. And that could be maybe the first thing that you do to get your leadership involved and your leadership bought in, is to do a trial piece. And the work is evolutionary. It never stops. It doesn't stop changing. You have to keep embracing the principles. You have to keep reporting your increased philanthropic investment and the deeper engagement that you're getting, because it will happen. And then, I suggest, if you're interested in these principles, there's a book, Women in, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a complete blank. Alex, what is the name of the book? It's
Gender
Gender
Matters.
Matters. Thank you. Gender Matters. It's the tip of my tongue. Written by Kathleen Lair. And it's definitely a great resource. A lot of schools have done book clubs. Alex and I have both helped lead book clubs for schools and organizations. Happy to do that. But these 6 principles are key. And let me move to the next one quickly, just because I want there to be time for questions. This is the building strategy. And when I talk about the 7 T's of philanthropy, you all may have heard these. I guess raise a hand if you've heard of this, the T's. I think people are very familiar with the 5 T's, but what we found, particularly in inclusive philanthropy in the last few years, is we've added the last 2 T's, which I'll talk about. But these, we live and die by these with Women for Madison, and now with my Black alumni group, and our parents. But time is the time that people give. That's their first point of entry. Are they showing up? Are they mentoring? Are they volunteering? Women in particular will engage more deeply as volunteers before becoming a donor. And so honoring this is key to building a philanthropic program with women. Talent is the next one. Donors want to, particularly women and inclusive donors, want to contribute their skills, knowledge, and expertise. And so this is where you bring them in as mentors, get them involved in the colleges, get them involved somewhere in your university organizational structure where they can really dig in and give their time and their talent. The third is treasure. That's their gift. And they may give a small gift at first to see how you treat them, to see how you respond to that, to see how that's embraced and stewarded. So treasure is definitely the financial piece. But they definitely want to get what we found, and in my work, what I found is that women give consistently, collaboratively, and it's values driven. The fourth thing they bring, which is huge, and we often overlook it, is testimony. That's their voice. So they start telling all the good news about what you and your university are doing. And with Women for Madison and the other executive advisory councils I've worked with at other schools, they're really your insiders. They're your ambassadors. They're peer to peer, and they're telling other people about you. So it doesn't come from Cannie Graham. It doesn't come from Alex Townsend. It comes from Sally Joe, who actually has given a gift, has seen the impact, and wants to share the good news. And so the testimony becomes really important, and capturing that in your storytelling through marketing, through communications, really, really a groundbreaker. Ties are their networks. Like I said, women just don't come alone. They bring everybody they know, and they will bring these women to the table. And that's where I've seen, like I mentioned, the Alpha Kappa Alpha women. I was a friend of one from college. I put her on my board, and within a year, we must have had 30 Alpha Kappa Alphas involved with Women from Madison, donating at the Amethyst Circle level, really engaged. And so don't forget about the ties either. But trust and transparency are the two that have been added most recently. And with inclusive philanthropy, 100%, it is essential in that philanthropic relationship. Excuse me. But especially with women, that you have that relational engagement, consistency, and responsiveness, that being seen and heard and valued drives trust. That's what we need. That's what we want to do. Think about your own gifts as a woman, if you've given, or whatever identity you're coming from. Very important. And then transparency. They want to know and they want to see where their contributions go and the impact that they are making. So we do an annual impact report for our women every year, just a small, little thing we send out in the mail to our Amethyst Circle members. It's an impact report specifically designed for them, very personalized. It's not a huge actually cost, but it's well worth it because they cherish that when it comes. So transparency is key to the next steps in terms of building a very successful strategy. All right, we have another question for you. What outcome would you most want from a women-focused giving program? Deeper donor relationships, good. And I will say too, as we're sitting here talking and you're answering the question, I will say these annual donors have built a huge pipeline for our next upcoming campaign. And so many of the original founders and women that gave in 21 to 23 are now major gift pipeline potential for our university. So we had 200 women who gave at that $5,000 level that are now being asked for major gifts and are now in my portfolio or other or other people's portfolios, where we're continuing to build. So the investment is definitely worth the time. Awesome. So deeper donor relationships. Yeah, you'll get it from a women's philanthropy program. Trust me. All right. So Alex and I were both going to just kind of talk about, yes, we're talking about the US, we're talking about Virginia. How does this apply to where you are in the world? That definitely matters. So Alex, do you want to start? Or do you?
Yeah, sure. So I think what I hear a lot being in the UK is that some of the principles that may work in the US might not necessarily resonate here in the UK, which has really triggered this kind of journey that I'm on to understand what does women's philanthropy look like here in the UK. And that's kind of what created the podcast that I host, where I speak with different organizations who are doing this work. And we have actually found that women do want to give here in the UK. And some of the things that Cannie has mentioned around not being asked, not being approached, not being considered are perhaps maybe what's going on here as well, which is why we're not seeing the kind of levels of giving that perhaps we would assume women might just give just because it's there and they should know about it in a way. So we kind of wanted to, I guess, have use this as a conversation to help kind of kickstart with other organizations to see what you're finding. But we feel confident that these principles are actually very universal and can be applied to the UK. And as I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, one of the stats that's just come out is around the amount of assets under women's management now. So that going from 4.6 trillion to 6.6 trillion in Europe, and similarly in the US, 10 trillion to 18 trillion in the last 5 years. But what's coming out a lot in these reports is that women are being overlooked and assets aren't being managed by traditional firms because women are not being considered effectively, because asset management companies, wealth management companies are used to working with men who have been the primary audience of wealth historically. And some of the things that we're finding in those reports around reasons that women aren't engaging with wealth management institutions are similar to what we hear within philanthropy. So we, especially in the US, where we have a little bit more research around what the landscape of women's philanthropy in particular looks like through the Women's Philanthropy Institute at Indiana University. And so we can come to a conclusion, we think pretty confidently, that if we were to get going with some of these projects here in the UK, we would be successful. And as I said, we've seen it. The King's Trust has a very successful multi-million dollar or pound program that they run. Newcastle University has really been leading the charge on this from a university perspective. Mind just launched a women's giving program. And myself, I worked on a women's giving program in my last role and really saw the transformation that could happen when you started to target women specifically and really thought holistically about how they engage, as Candy's saying, with their time, talent, and treasures. So it's kind of, we're I know Candy, you had some reflections on this as well.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the second principle where you just have to talk to your women or your inclusive groups and ask them what they want. So whether you're a woman in the United States or you're a woman in Manchester, England, or you're a woman in South Africa, you're going to be able to say and describe and talk about what you want as a donor, what you want to see as an investor. And so having that conversation is critical. That doesn't change. We're all women, but the way that we communicate with these women and these donors is essential. Hearing from them, seeing, these initiatives that we put on and the events that we put on are all based on our alumni parent feedback. I'm not out there just creating things because I think they're cool or they're going to be highly successful. I ask first. I have my women help me plan them. So I think that just knowing that key principle is whether that's doing focus groups. I've done that with oodles of different organizations here in the US, is hosting focus groups for them so that we can get that feedback, we can get that honest conversation going. And so that's a big one for me. I think, sure, you have to change the nomenclature that's different in different countries. You have to use, we call it annual giving. I believe, is that legacy giving and
Uh, Annual giving is kind of like individual giving here.
individual giving. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
So, you just have to know those differences. So, yes, it's not a cookie cutter. That's what happens at JMU is going to be able to happen at the University of Manchester, but the principles are the same. And if you follow those, you can really start to hear your own story. And every program is unique because of that. Like, I can't put up 5 programs in the US that are doing women's giving that are exactly the same because we've all listened to our constituents and asked them what they wanted. So that's a big one. I also think, we heard Alex and I came over to England last year and visited, and with my mentor Kathleen. It was lovely. And we actually talked with quite a few people and met with some folks who we met with Newcastle and chatted with some financial advisors. And there was this perception that maybe the US was too bold in their asking or too direct. Um, but I challenge that a little bit with women because I don't think we're asking at all or asking enough. And so women sort of want to be part of the story now, part of the fundraising campaigns. And so, but you have to do that in your way and what's comfortable for your organization. So again, maybe it is more discreet where you are, but again, you'll know what feels right because you're a part of that culture as well. So those are just a few of the things that I would add. Um, but I think transparency, accountability, trust is universal. So,
That's great. So we've had a few questions come in, and I think the one that you're kind of some of the things you were saying around not asking enough, and one of the things that we haven't really touched on much is the research element. So we
mhm.
also know from our pools, and I've heard this from multiple fundraisers, that our pools are just not very diverse. So Andy asked, can you speak to the importance of prospect research here? I looked at our male to female split for prospects at my institution and imagine a lot of places need to up their game as we do. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. So there are, like I said, it's just a few data points that you can pull that start to really tell the story about your university. So when we started to do it, and I actually have a worksheet I can share later with some of these data points, but again, I didn't want to get analysis paralysis and get stuck in the weeds with the data because you can. I mean, you're in prospect research, you know. So what we looked at was male to female giving annually at the different levels. So for us, it was annual giving, major giving, who was sort of in that leadership between 10 and 25,000 in the US, 50K, and above. So we broke those out and we looked at the percentages of men that were giving and the percentages of women that were giving. We looked by years, so by decades. Who were the people giving at what decades? We saw more people starting to give in their 40s, 50s, and 60s because that's when they got, a little more comfortable financially. Um, we started to look at planned giving. That's our estate gifts and bereavement gifts, that people leave to the university when upon death. And so we started to look at those as well too. We also did a portfolio scan, and we started to look at the number of men versus women in our advancement, um, our advancement professionals portfolios. And we were seeing far more men in portfolios than women. I also did some internal engagement research and recon at I started to look at the boards and councils across campus. We have a board for every college and we have a board for everything. And so I started to look at all of those boards and see the number of women that were sitting on those boards and then the diversity on those boards very low in the beginning. And so now we've really worked hard to try and place different folks on these boards across the campus so that there's, again, different voices at the table. So there are just a few data points, Andy, that we looked at. We also looked at the average gift. So that's how we got to the $2,500 a year or $5,000 over 2 years. That was a stretch for us. We saw that women at JMU were giving at a certain level, were giving about $12,000 to $1,200 per year. And we wanted it to feel special. We wanted it to feel like they were making an effort. So we went to the $2,500 mark. We knew it wasn't for everybody, but again, my return on investment was these 200 women giving $5,000 every 2 years. There's other levels at which women can give at the $100 level, whatever, there's other ways that they can give annually, but this was just to be for the Amethyst Circle. And that was some of the data, a very broad and quick snapshot of what we looked at. But again, I can share that information as well with you after if you're interested. Please reach out.
Yeah, and I think that leads to the question. There's one from Megan and one from Martha. So the one from Megan was about the specific amount. So I
Yeah.
think you mentioned the Giving Circle is 15,000 in year one and then 5,000 in year two and three. Could you share more about how the Giving Circle is evolving post year three?
Yes. So the founders were $15,000. It started as 2 year cycles. So 21, 23, 23, 25. We're just wrapping up 25 right now. We had 15 were the founders. That was over a 2 year period, and people can pay off in a pledge too, over the 2 years. Um, the 5,000 was also 2 years. So the 15 made you an Amethyst Circle founder. The five made you an Amethyst Circle member, both over 2 years. So in that first year, we had 79 women who were $15,000 donors in that first 2 year cycle, excuse me. And now everybody's a $5,000 over 2 years. What we have now decided going into the 25, 27 cycle is we're just making it easy. Like it's $2,500 a year to be an Amethyst Circle member. It's just easier for marketing. It's easier now. We've just switched our CRMs, which is, as everyone knows, is a small nightmare. So it's just been easier to go to a more annual model for this. But now what's happened, as I mentioned, is that a lot of these women are now doing major gifts. And at JMU, until this in July, it switches to 50K, but it's $25,000 in the US. They're writing gift agreements and doing a $25,000 gift now. They're doing $15,000 to cover their next 6 years of Amethyst Circle membership. So now we're tracking them out 6 years. And then they're giving the additional 10 or whatever to our endowment. And so our endowment also continues to grow. And that's actually that's like 3.0 for me, Women from Madison 3.0. We're going to try and really focus on the endowment as that is, in perpetuity. So as we go into this third cycle, the focus will be, again, we're still going to give our scholarships in the expendable, working on the endowment, and then just going to an easier marketing message with $2,500 every couple of years. I'm not going to get into this, but I'll be happy to talk offline with anybody. We did just launch a citrine circle. Our colors are purple and gold. That's why we're amethyst and citrine. Very proud of that at JMU. So we monopolized on colors. The citrine circle is for younger women, and it's half. So we call them graduates of the last decade, or gold graduates of the last decade. That's half of the Amethyst Circle. And that's how we're getting young women, seniors who are graduating involved. They can pay it off over 2 years, payroll deduction or debit. I don't have my words this morning. It just comes out of their account monthly. So that's a new thing we just sparked to try and get younger women involved.
Great. Okay. I think that speaks to Dale's question around, he said that he enjoyed the stat about the wealth transfer and how do we successfully engage across generations. You can add anything to that. I'm just conscious we have about 6 minutes left. So Martha's question was, can I ask if any women who gives e.g. to research can join your Amethyst Circle, or is it just those who give to the scholarship for underrepresented students? Also, have men, corporates ever wanted to give to this cause? Sorry. And how do you navigate that with the circle?
Yes. So again, we are open to everyone. In the United States, we cannot restrict anything, and most recently, nothing. So we have always had a statement on our website. You can go to the jmu.edu/women for Madison. There is a statement on our website that says that we are open to all genders, races, ethnicities, whatever. I have anyone and anybody and everyone can come to my things and can give. We've had parents, we've had grandparents give in honor of their graduating senior. We've had men give in honor of their spouses or wives or partners. So yes, we have male who we steward just like we steward everybody else. We also, to answer the question about research, we decided to restrict this to just underrepresented scholarships because when I started this with my council, I went to them to see what would get them excited. Our number one priority at JMU in any campaign is scholarship dollars. It's expensive to go to school in the US, and it's what's needed, particularly for first generation Pell eligible students. So our volunteers helped decide that. That wasn't my decision. We looked at a lot of things, like did we want to do a capital campaign around a building? Did we want to do research dollars? This just happened to be what we decided that we wanted to do. So I would say that when talking to your constituents, you have to find out what's important to them and what will get them excited about giving. When I have found with donors that when I start to insert something that I think that they would like to do, it always backfires on me. And women will tell you that. So they wanted to focus on underrepresented students, this $5,000 gap that we have as a university in aid and scholarship. So that's where that came from. But we've also left it open that conversation could change. And if in a few years we decide we want to build a women's center or whatever, we could do that. But I've left it up to the volunteers and their voice to decide where that money goes. So you could do research, but this is a very specific, for now, fund.
Great. I think we might have time for maybe one more question. If there's anybody who has a question on, you can just unmute yourself.
Hi there, I'm Bridget. I put a question in the Q&A, but I'm happy to just say it out loud.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Cannie, you did mention a little bit. I'm glad that you included that last bit on your website and how you kind of get around that because you're a publicly funded school. How would I propose this to my supervisor in a way that's persuasive? Because I've gotten a little bit of pushback when I've tried to address this before because of the inclusivity part of it. I mean, obviously, in our mission, vision, and values, we're an inclusive organization. And so she wants everything that we do to be reflective of that.
Totally get it. And it's funny, every time I send out a mass email, I get something back from somebody like, what about the men? And tongue in cheek, I'm like, well, we've always been fundraising for men. I mean, I would never say that out loud. Just to this group. But what we say, and another one of my first lady of the university, the president's wife, was really involved with, they just left and went to American University. But she was like my right hand and my ride or die in fundraising for a long time. And she said once in an event, and then we used it forever, was, we are not just women for Madison, we are women for all of Madison. And so while we might be an affinity group that gets together and enjoys similar activities and mentorships and whatever, events, our money goes to anyone who applies. So we have male scholarship recipients, we have female, Black, white, gay, you name it. We have it all in our pool, and they meet them. So it's not restricted to female students. We can't restrict, again, we're a federally funded university, so we can't restrict to any group in the US. But, and so far, knock on wood, they haven't restricted gender, groups but because we're open to everyone and because we've been so intentional about that from the get-go with that statement on our website, we haven't had a lot of problem with it. And again, if I get an errant email from somebody that's complaining, like sometimes I'll get an email that says, well, what about my son? He should get a scholarship. And I respond back and I said, actually, your son can apply for the Amethyst Circle Scholarship. Mm-hmm. It is a blind scholarship application. So, and financially does it. So I'm not even involved. I just get a list every year of our 30 kids and then we get to know them. So I've been pleasantly surprised at who receives it. And it's everybody. So, and I also make really certain that at events that I do have diversity represented. So we just also make sure that we do that. But I think in talking with your supervisor, the fact that you're not even maybe discussing it or asking means ultimately that there's money on the table that is not being asked for, is not being stewarded, is not being cultivated. And in the long run, you will see the benefit of putting some effort into working with women or other affinity groups.
And if there's anyone, I guess you can speak to within your development team or within your donor pool who could help influence. I think we've found as well, there's either two ways that this will get started. It's either internally that you try to move it forward, or there's external, you have philanthropists coming to you and saying, why are you not doing anything? And I don't know if it's the case with you guys, but donors speak at organizations that I've been at. And so that can really help if you can maybe socialize it with somebody who can help kind of be that advocate to take it forward with you, because then it kind of progresses it a bit more quickly. I'm conscious of time, so we now are a minute over. But thank you all so much for joining today. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation. As we said, we have the Women Who Give network on LinkedIn that we're going to be adding everyone to. If you want to join, that would be fantastic. We'll be also having further conversations like this in the future. So please do attend those and reach out to Cannie and I if you ever want to have specific conversations about your institution and if you want to do something like the book club, or if you want any kind of help getting this started, we'd be happy to have that conversation. I think, was there anything else? Is that all,
No,
Cannie?
I'll stay on for a minute if anybody wants
Yeah,
to chat, but thank you so much. And I'm just really glad to be invited. Thanks, Alex. This was
yes. Thank you so much.
great.